joined a session with me in the past. My name is Daniele, and as Sarah mentioned, I am our team manager for construction solutions here at IMAGINiT. I've been with the company for 13 years, and my primary responsibility is to manage a team of consultants solely dedicated to the construction solutions, primarily around Autodesk products, but we help with a lot of different additional tools, including our own tools. So with that, if you don't know about us here at IMAGINiT, we are a brand worldwide company. IMAGINiT is the portion of our company that really supports the Autodesk side of the business, so all of the Autodesk solutions, but we do have a number of subsidiary or sister companies under Rand Ascent, so Manual Creation, Rand 3D, and Rand Sim. But all of those other icons around the Rand icon are partners of ours. So on the services side, our company, we primarily focus on supporting the technology. So we are a partner with many different software providers, and at our IMAGINiT, we resell a lot of those products, but we also help to develop solutions around those products. So if you're unfamiliar with us, that's IMAGINiT in a nutshell, and I'll kind of push the salesy stuff to the side, and we can get to focus on today's topic or today's agenda. So BIM for construction. I'm going to try my best to keep this is brief. Well, I shouldn't say, I don't want to keep it brief. I want to be thorough, but I don't want to overload with detail or information. So the presentation that I put together today, I'm going to just do a general overview of BIM. So if you don't know what BIM is, where have you been? No, but really building information modeling, just talking through the process and how it's sort of evolved over the course of the last decade and a half, and then tie that into how we can support the BIM process with Autodesk cloud solutions. And then I'll spend a little bit of time walking through those cloud solutions, giving my take through my experience and working with our customers, showing you areas of the construction solutions where I feel like we're currently realizing the most benefits. And then maybe during Q&A, we'll discuss where the vision is, where we see this going in the future, to make sure that you have the sense to prepare yourselves to kind of get in front of the technology before the technology catches up to you. So with that, I've probably talked over the last 13 years so many times about the idea of BIM. And early on, it was really defining what BIM was and getting people to understand building information modeling. I feel like the idea of BIM has been around long enough where probably most of you here have a pretty good idea or pretty good understanding of what BIM is, but maybe not necessarily an idea of how to apply it to your practices. So I want to kind of set the stage here, just go through a really quick overview of BIM and where it currently sits, and how we can support that through our construction efforts. So I actually stole these slides from Autodesk. I thought these were a really good way just to run through the process and talk about BIM. So BIM really does have an application all the way through the project delivery, from the planning phase to design, build, and then what really we start to realize the value, or the owner realizes the value of building information modeling in the operations of their buildings or of their job sites, their real estate. So starting with the planning phase, this is one area I think, at least with Autodesk, they're starting to crack into this idea of generative design and site planning. So the planning portion traditionally will do site acquisition. We'll start to do case studies on potentially what will fit on the site, the utilities where they need to be placed, really just laying out the site and doing site planning. So in the past, there wasn't really a lot of BIM solutions to assist with this idea of site planning. Just recently, Autodesk acquired Spacemaker, and they rebranded it. It's called Forma now. It's a web-based application. It's still very, very early on, but it does have a lot of site tools, and it ties GIS information, uh, land survey, conceptual design. So you can do a lot of site planning using those tools. And then really in the conceptual phase of the project, those can start to tie into your Revit design. So I don't want to get too specific into solutions as I go through this, but just understand that this idea of building information modeling really does start at the planning phase of the project. It doesn't have to start at necessarily the building design phase of the project. All right, and then we jump into design. So what are we talking about through the design phase? Well, BIM, we create strategies around designing that model. So actually constructing or virtually constructing it within a design modeling program, whether that's Revit, ArchiCAD, maybe it's SketchUp. There's a lot of tools that can generate 3D models. The coordination of those, again, there are different tools that support coordination of 3D. But think about this, instead of coordinating models through a traditional 2D document set, overlaying XREFs or overlaying layouts, we're able to aggregate 3D models together. And the solution doesn't really matter. There are, again, a lot of tools on the market that support model coordination, but all of this ties into the idea of BIM. Instead of just using 2D documentation and looking at flat drawings, we are moving into this, or we've already moved into this 3D world. From there, our design documentation is developed. During the design phase, we can start pulling quantity takeoffs, schedules, pulling estimates from the model. So a large part of what we will discuss today is really focused on that piece of the puzzle, and then how that can tie into the construction side, the build side of the equation through BIM. In some advanced modeling scenarios or advanced design, we might have modular construction, or certain aspects, certain portions of the building might be supported by fabrication level of drawings like curtain wall systems, equipment systems, etc. So there is potential for fabrication modeling. Really, this clash detection, I think this kind of ties back into the idea of coordination. But again, when we're in a 3D world and we have advanced technology, we can really gain a lot of quality and gain a lot of horsepower out of the solutions that we support. And then on the build side, so once we actually go into construction, we're relying on shop drawings, fabrication drawings, reviewing different assemblies, managing that project, so managing all of that data and information. And eventually, when we've completed our side of the construction part of the project, we're required to commission and hand over that information to the owner, which in turn they are going to utilize to support the operations of the facility. So really the whole life cycle of the project development, from design through construction, the deliverable is not just the set of drawings that the owner is asking for. Owners are becoming more educated, and they are requiring 3D because they understand the concept of as-built models, digital twins. You've probably heard that term, but they can rely on the information that you're developing or that you're managing throughout the project delivery to then support facility management and operations. So on the operations side, we're analyzing the building. There are all types of really cool things tied to IoT, Internet of Things, that can feed back to databases, FM programs, and really utilize the metadata, really creating a database of information that supports the operations and maintenance of a project. Ultimately, all of that comes together. We can call that a digital twin depending on how much we're utilizing the information and what type of, we're getting real-time feeds, or if we're supporting it through dashboards, other technology like an Archibus solution for FM. And then when we complete that, we go right back to the beginning. If we need to do rework on the project, we've already got this 3D model that we have access to. If we need to do a renovation or support additional construction on a job, then we basically start that cycle over again. But if we have existing BIM information, it makes it a lot easier. So we're not starting from a 2D document set and building everything again from the ground up. Right. So ultimately, this is the entire process laid out in one slide. You can see everything here. Through the planning and design phase, that's really where we're analyzing and optimizing our designs, preparing them for construction. Obviously, through the construction phase, through that build cycle, we're constantly updating documentation, managing the project, working with our A&Es, and collaborating. And potentially, where we have the ability to, we can start to automate some of these workflows, like submittal information, RFI information. We don't really need to worry about the visualization. In fact, I feel like the visualization piece, especially if we're tying in 4D simulation or timelining, this could really extend well beyond the design phase and probably go into the project management build phase. But regardless, that's just kind of BIM in high level overview. So BIM for construction, why should we really care about building information modeling? Well, the huge benefits on the construction side, well, number one, the owner is probably already requiring, or in most cases, not all cases, but the owner is requiring the design teams to produce 3D models. They understand the benefits of it. They have requirements for operations. So if the owner already requires a model, then on the construction side, we need to understand where those benefits are. Even though we might be getting construction documents from a 3D workflow, if we're just supporting construction documents and marking up 2D plans, we're missing something. We're missing the ability to communicate better with our design teams, to coordinate the construction efforts. And it's like if you had a very advanced system and you're only using a very, very small piece of it. So if it's there, let's understand how to utilize the model. In using BIM, we have increased accuracy on coordination primarily. Let's see, I have some notes here. This also lends to increased accuracy of quantity takeoff. So there's some products I'll talk about in a couple of slides here that support that. But when we're dealing with 3D quantities, 3D areas, volumes, components, it's much easier to do takeoffs using a 3D model to get that your initial quantities and takeoffs, using some solutions rather than having someone sit there and do 2D takeoff or setting up a database for an estimating takeoff on a preliminary kind of estimate. It also mitigates risk. So we can avoid a lot of potential change orders by catching issues prior to construction. Again, this lends to the coordination of the model and making sure that all of the design consultants are coordinated, scheduling coordination, model review meetings. BIM improves communication, and again, that coordination piece. One thing that we see in the Autodesk Construction Cloud a lot is that we are able to leverage existing data. This kind of ties back to the owner requirement. If the owner is already requiring a model to be designed by the design team, then we can leverage the information that they're putting into the 3D model to support things like submittal management, warranty information, closeout information. We can extract items from the 3D model rather than having to manually go through a spec, derive all of the spec requirements, tie them to physical or tie them to non-physical assets, just a line of data. So there are ways that we can start to automate some of these processes to make our life a lot easier, and also tying back to mitigating the risk. If it's in the model, then we know it's there. If it's an item that we're reading from a spec or a spreadsheet, someone user error, we might miss a line of information, and all of a sudden we don't have a certain fixture on the job site, or we haven't ordered the correct amount of concrete. There are a number of examples of how that could cause potential risk in the delivery of a project. And ultimately, when you adopt these new technologies and these new processes, you are going to win more business. It will make you more efficient, more effective, and just getting into the idea of supporting BIM and being a virtual design and construction company. Owners are requiring this. You'll see it in RFPs. You'll have BIM requirements. They want their information to be robust, to be trackable. They want to create audit trails. And if we're just doing this through 2D workflows, we're going to miss a lot of projects because we can't store as much information, or we can't access the information in the way that we can with a BIM in a unified workflow. Getting into a little bit more detail, I like this slide. This was from a different presentation that I did earlier this year, but some of the major things, just feedback that I've heard from a lot of our clients. There are a lot of challenges that are posed today to construction. There's project data disconnects, change management, rework is causing a lot of money and time. There's a lot of pricing and time pressures. So you have to put out your bids. It's a very competitive marketplace. How do you support onboarding your own internal folks with new technology? That is a challenge and some pressure. What are your client expectations? Going back to what those owner requirements are. Communication, it's difficult. If we're relying on phone, email, there are gaps there. And if we can't track it, then we can't prove it. So another challenge that can be supported through BIM. Poor reporting and analytics, optimization and adoption of technology, and outside competitive pressures. So keeping up with the industry. So how does BIM support that? Well, first off, we have to understand, starting with this idea of BIM, BIM is a process. Building information modeling is not a single solution. It's not a product. It is a process. So you're probably already familiar with that. One thing I think I run into a lot with companies, especially at the owner level, owners that we support, they've heard about BIM and they understand they need to be requesting BIM, but they don't understand what the data requirements are for a BIM project or the costs associated to BIM. So one thing we really want to do is educate not only our general contractors, but also the owners to say, hey, if you're requesting BIM, you need to know what level of development you're really requiring for your project, and do you need that information? Maybe we don't need a level 400 or a level 500 for every different system within our project, but maybe certain systems that you plan on tracking, like your heating and cooling systems, your plumbing systems, depending on what type of project it is, you might want to model certain things in a higher level of detail. LOD, we call that, well, it's really level of development as laid out by the AIA. But just to get an understanding of what the requirements of BIM are, you need to have a thorough investigation of what the industry standard of BIM is. And that can start with reviewing different BIM execution plans. So there are a lot of public entities out there that have their BIM execution plans released, so you can review them, see what types of requirements different universities have for BIM. Really everything that I've ever reviewed is roughly based off of, or very closely based off of, AIA documentation. So back, I think it was 2008, the AIA came out with an E202 document that outlined the contract requirements for a BIM project, where you would fill in information, kind of owner requirements and job requests in that E202. This is updated to the G203, so I believe that one was just released in 2022. It's generally the same as the E202 from 2008, but because the landscape has evolved, it's a little bit more specific and more detailed. But those are really good places to start. If you're trying to get a better understanding of what project requirements are in BIM projects, you can go into, I know we've worked with Army Corps of Engineers. They have a really detailed BIM execution plan or requirements that you can just go right to their website and download it. A lot of public universities, I think Penn State has a very good one. Or if you search really starting with the AIAG 203, that will lay out the guidelines for the contract of a BIM project. So starting there is really the best place, reviewing those documents, but then also understanding level of development, which I'll talk about in a second here, and understanding what your deliverables are throughout the process of design and construction. So the AIA lays everything out into 5 phases of LOD, or five levels, I should call it, of LOD. At LOD 100, we have schematic design. So potentially through conceptual design, a lot of times that happens before the job has been awarded. So there aren't necessarily contract requirements for a CD level of deliverable, but once a project is awarded and a BIM execution plan is created, we usually will start with LOD 100, which is suitable for schematic design. One thing that I think people get very confused about is that these different LODs are not just assigned as a blanket level LOD to the entire project. At the deliverable point of the project, when you're at 100% CD, you might have requirements up to potentially 300, or even post-construction, if you're doing field updates to your models, you might be requiring a level 500, which is the as-built requirement. I pulled this screenshot in the background here directly from the AIAG 203, and this is what we call the LOD matrix. I'm just going to take a quick minute to talk about this, but in this case, the standard document uses the CSI uniformat, so it's a sort of assembly coding system to really outline all of the different parts of a potential model in a project. And then if we look at the top here, there are different columns, so project milestones. Depending on the project, you're going to have different milestones for delivery with different dates. So the first milestone would typically be when you're going to deliver that SD set of documents. If we look underneath the milestones here, you've got a column for LOD, which stands for level of development, and then MEA, which stands for model element author. That is the company that's responsible for modeling one of these different rows at a specific LOD at a specific milestone in the project. So if you understand that, the progression left to right, the project is early on to the left, and maybe we get to 100% CD, or let's say 100% CD over here, milestone 5. This matrix is going to start to be filled up with more LOD and probably different consultants that are delivering on their parts of the project. So something to understand is that a lot of times something might be developed for 100% CD up to a level 300. That is the suitable level for traditional construction documents. If there are certain systems, like I've used the example of curtain wall many times on this, curtain walls might require shop and fabrication level drawings, extremely accurate to field conditions, field measurements, and that might be passed from, say, the architect is required to deliver LOD 300 for their curtain wall system at 100% CD. And then in the next phase of the deliverable in the project, the curtain wall manufacturer is responsible for the fabrication level shop drawings at that construction phase. And then finally, the as-built requirement. And this is one that a lot of things might skip between 300 and go right to 500 if they don't require fabrication and shop drawings, but they could definitely still require to be updated in the as-built model. So on the construction side, this is something that you have to be aware of. If there is a requirement via the contract for an LOD 500, that means that someone is responsible for updating the 3D model. A lot of times the architect will have an additional fee and they will send people out to the field to do sort of active field survey if things are being installed or moved around. Hopefully that's tracked through your project management, marked up in document sets, and then the model is updated. But there definitely is a requirement if it is outlined that certain systems have a 500 requirement, that someone is responsible for updating the model. Even though it's already gone through 100% CD, it's being constructed, someone is responsible for making those updates. So that's why it's really important to understand the contract requirements, and from an owner standpoint, know what you're asking for. Do you need LOD 500? How are you going to support that? A lot of times the LOD 500 might not even have as much detail, or it doesn't require as much detail as say 400, but we just need to have geometric and accurate representation of an object within a physical space. So most of the time it's important for coordination, but if we're swapping out equipment or changing the spec on equipment through construction, then that information needs to be updated to support the LOD 500. So hopefully that makes some sense. It's good. Hopefully we have some good questions here too. Feel free to put your questions in and we can have the discussion at the end about this. Okay, so how do these cloud solutions support this whole idea of BIM? Well, if we look at the whole landscape of the Autodesk Construction Cloud, everything along this top row here are different products that are supported by the Autodesk Construction Cloud. We refer to this as the ACC. And underneath each of those products, just a few bullet points, quick summary about what those products support. So again, tying back into the idea of a BIM process from conceptual design all the way to operations, we have products that can support this process. For the sake of construction, the ones that I want to focus on primarily today are these products: Autodesk BIM Collaborate, Autodesk Assemble, Takeoff, and then we'll kind of skip a couple of the estimating tools and go into Autodesk Build. You'll notice that Autodesk Build does support project management, cost management, quality, and safety. For the sake of utilizing BIM, most of it ties back to project management. There's overlap between really all three of these, but primarily through demo, I'm going to really focus on more of the asset tracking and how we can use model data to really track information on the project management side. But everything leading up to project management, these products here, we are managing that 3D model and we're preparing it for construction. So really heavy lift on the front end here, and then just supporting that 3D model during the build phase. And then when we do have handover, we're essentially closing everything out and giving the owner what they require for managing the model. All of these products in the Autodesk Construction Cloud are supported by, sorry, my graphic here is blocking out this, Autodesk Docs. So Autodesk Docs is the document control portion of the ACC. You can think of that as like, it's essentially your folder structure. There's more to it than that, but everything is supported. The file management, the document control portion of the ACC is supported by Autodesk Docs. If you have any of these products, at least the ones that are labeled Autodesk on the top, all of these products come with Autodesk Docs, so it's a requirement. If you purchase licenses of Autodesk Build, you automatically get Autodesk Docs. If you purchase licenses of BIM Collaborate or BIM Collaborate Pro, you automatically get access to Autodesk Docs. For every AEC collection that you purchase, you get an entitlement to Autodesk Docs. So it's usually a question that comes up in sales conversations. All right, wow, where am I at? So overtime here. I'll take a few minutes to give everyone an overview of the construction platform and how we can support BIM. A couple of key points that I think are important for understanding. Uh, Maybe you don't have input into the design effort. Maybe you are design build and you are heavily involved in design. So depending on what your scenario is, you can still support BIM through your construction workflows in the ACC. So I have a couple of projects and I just wanted to have some examples pre-defined and pre-set up. I'm going to start with this typical data set that we've used for demonstration. It's called the Big Box Food Mart project. So this is the ACC that we're looking at here. In this project, so when we create projects in the Autodesk Construction Cloud, the project is managed by itself. So the project itself, we create a new project, all of the folder structure, the members in the project, the permissions to that project are really isolated to that project. So instead of having to worry about like a project drive or something that we would traditionally support on a network, a local network, since we're doing this in the cloud, our projects are created as their own entities, and then we can manage them specifically as their own project. So anything that I create here, with the exception, if we're sharing folders between projects or between accounts, there is the opportunity to share information using a bridge function. We've got some other webinars on our website that you can look at to understand bridge, but really the project is managed as its own standalone project. So all of the reporting for the project goes to one place. All of the communication for the project happens in one place. We don't need to worry about someone dropping a file in the wrong folder. If they're working in this project, it's very difficult for them to dump information into the wrong spot or correspond to an issue or anything that comes up in the project to a different project. So I'd like to point that out. And then within that project, the Big Box Food Mart, I have activated a lot of different modules of the Autodesk Construction Cloud for this project. So I do have access to Autodesk Docs, Design Collaboration, which supports the model sharing, the Revit portion of the project. We have model coordination in here that supports the automation of clash detection. Again, going back to the updates from the Revit models. Autodesk Takeoff, which is the 3D takeoff tool that supports model takeoff. Build is the project management piece. Cost management is the cost management piece. And then we have insights, which give us project level insights specifically about this project. So just show here. So in this particular project, we can see our project member list, and there are two different access levels that someone can be granted to a project. You can either be a project administrator or a project member. I won't go into too much detail because I want to show some other stuff during this presentation, but essentially the project administrator has full control over the settings and the permissions in that project. So as a project admin, I can add people to the project. I can change their permissions. I can assign them or notify them that submittal is in their ball and court and RFI is their ball and court. There's a lot of different things that you can do as an administrator. As a project member, depending on how permissions are set up, you have a more limited access level in the project. So depending on, again, this goes into a lot of configuration within the project environment and build. But if we have someone like John Jones, that is our HVAC engineer, our mechanical engineer, John Jones might only have access to docs, or he might have access to docs and design collaboration. Within docs, he might have limited access to certain folders. So these are all things that we can control within the ACC. Let me get back on point here. What I wanted to show with the big box food mart is on the construction side, I talked about collaboration and coordination a lot early on in the presentation. When we are working with 3D models, we're able to make good updates throughout the design and the construction process, and we're able to review those changes in a very unique or a very good way. Instead of seeing that lines have changed on a document or something, a door potentially moved on a document, we can now review these in a 3D sense. So tying this information back to how we're supporting it on the design side, as a project manager, someone in construction, you can view, you can view one of these 3D models directly in the cloud without having access or without having to worry about having access to it, to Revit or to the RVT directly. So we call this the large model viewer in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. We can see here all the ductwork. Looks like some light fixtures are turned on in this view as well. Looks like this view is set up for electrical and mechanical coordination. So if there were any areas where a light fixture overlapped a diffuser, we can set this up so that automatically when updates are being made to the Revit models, we're running a coordination check or a clash detection between those objects. So you might be familiar already with Navisworks and running clash detection. Well, in the cloud, we can set different views up from our Revit models to automatically run these interference checks immediately as the models are published up to the cloud. So someone that's managing the project, there's a heat map in this model coordination area. Let's see. That will show us all of the clashes between specific views that we've published in the project. So we can see right here that this MEP, the MEP version of the model, has 403 clashes with the architectural version of the model that's published out. There are ways to refine these different views and to isolate certain things. So from the architectural model, if we wanted to just say, isolate all of our interior partition walls and run a clash between all of the pipe from the MEP model, all we would have to do is create 3D views in the Revit model and have those set to publish up to the cloud. And then we can run an automated coordination that would generate a heat map like this. Some areas of the heat map you can ignore as it kind of creates this full list of all of your models and how they clash. If I'm looking at this and I see 403, there are probably a lot of soft clashes or non-clashes in here that I don't care about. But just by clicking on one of these, it will bring up a view of both of those models aggregated together, and it will show us where anything might have a potential clash. So conduit, let's see, where is that? Let me expand this. Usually it zooms in better than that, but we can see here, okay, there's conduit that is clashing with the slab. Now, are we going to model the opening through the slab? Probably not, unless again, it's a requirement that all openings are modeled in your BIM execution plan or in your contract document. But this is something I would typically deem as a non-issue, and it's dealt with in the field. So you can start to review these different clashes. If we want to change, let's see. If we just designate, okay, we know that surface, the foundation slab, the floor, the conduit is not an issue, we can mark that as not an issue, and then it removes it from the queue. So we'll say field fix, okay? And just by making that note, now there is an activity, an audit trail of me addressing that clash, saying that it's not an issue, the reason that it's not an issue, and we can go back and we can create a report of all of these potential items. So whenever you change a setting or assign someone to an issue within ACC, that item is tracked. If we're reviewing this for construction and we see that there might be, let's look at something more realistic. Usually try to find one, maybe it's not between these models, usually between structure and MEP. Here we go, 50 clashes. Let's see if we have any real ones here that we can create an issue from. So through that coordination, let's see. Well, that is a big issue. We've got a main trunk of duct running through a web joist. So if I click on any of these components, it's going to open up where that clash is in my list. So I've got my bar joist that interferes with the rectangular duct and the radius elbow. So it's going through both components here. That is definitely an issue. As soon as I highlight that through this model coordination and create an issue, let's see, I'm prompted to click a position on one of the highlighted models to create an issue. This is good enough. Notice how I'm already zoomed into this area, by the way. We'll just kind of click right there. When we create an issue through coordination, it automatically assigns this issue as a coordination issue, so it can be filtered out. We can get to it very quickly when we do a review of our issues in a project. It captures a thumbnail of that clash, and now I can take action on this. If I want to rename this clash for any reason, we can rename it. We can say that, all right, we just caught this, the status on this object is open. The type of issue that it's generating, as I mentioned, it automatically generates this as a coordination issue, a clash detection, and then a description between those two objects within the model. From that point, structure is probably not moving. So if we want to assign this coordination issue to our mechanical engineer, we can assign that issue to the role of HVAC engineer, and that whole group, anyone that is assigned this, any of the members in this project, and if you remember back to John Jones, he was assigned this role. If there was 5 MEP or 5 mechanical engineers on the project, they would all be automatically notified at this point that an issue has been created for clash. You can fill in other information here, the root cause of that. I would say this was a design issue. So we probably would say not documentation conflict, probably be design coordination. All right, so we'll assign that root cause. Any additional references that we want to assign to it, but there's no save button. As soon as we create this issue, those people are notified that there is an open issue, a coordination issue that they're assigned to. And then within the project, if I want to just review all of my different issues, we can go back to our issues tab and we can see that one was just created. I didn't set a due date or anything to it. There are no comments on that yet, but whoever is assigned this issue is now notified that they have an issue respond to. They can click directly on a link in an email that they get with the notification and open this, or in the project, the next time they open the project, they'll see on their homepage, their dashboard for the project, that they've been assigned an issue, which will give them a link. Oops. Just trying to go to my project homepage. But they would have a notification on a homepage of the project that would tell them that they've been assigned an issue. So it's a good way to build here. There we go. Homepage of build. Quick links to sheets, members, but if there are any work items, like an issue that has been assigned to me that I haven't resolved, we can click right on that. It will give us a list of our issues filtered down to us, and we can then click them to review them. So because I'm not the mechanical engineer, that coordination issue didn't show up in my list, but it would show up for them. So that's one way to coordinate and communicate. If that change needs to occur, we have that tracked. So we want to make sure that the mechanical engineer, the designer changes the model before we go to 100% CD. With a 3D model, so not using documents, with a 3D model, we are able to review this one. We're able to review versions of the model. So I would have probably, if that model was updated, I would have checked this in my coordination space. I would have checked the issue, seen that there's been a model update. Hopefully our mechanical engineer, when they close the issue, when they've resolved it and moved their ductwork, they're going to close the issue and they can put a comment, move the ductwork 2 feet to the left, so that we have information associated to that closed issue of what was changed. But if we're trying to review versions of the model, we are able to, in a 3D view, right now I'm in version 21 of my published model in the cloud. I can review it with version 20. Chances are not much has changed because we just use these for demonstration. Let's see, let me jump back a few different, let's go back to like version 14. Compare the latest version of the model to version 14 of the model, and this will give us a snapshot of all of the different model elements that changed between the models, and we can filter those views out. So we can see that, okay, flat result list, the cake display unit in this project changed. So where was it? Why is it not zooming in there? There we go. I was wondering why it didn't zoom in before, but if I click it, it highlights that object. So in version 21, display units here. Let's turn on version 14. So what changed between this? Oh, it wasn't a physical change, just a property of that family was updated. So from version 14, this Benson display property, that must be very specific to this object. Let's make sure we're seeing this whole thing. Change from not having any information to apparently now it's telling us that it has Benson display under that parameter. That might be a bad example. Let's take a look at the freezer door here. All right, freezer door, better example here of something that we can check that has a movement of 0.33 inches from 14. So it looks like it moved from this position to the right. Is that 0.33 inches. So very, very small movement. It's more than that. What's that? Inches by, I don't know if that's feet or not, but you can see that we are able to pick up that change between the model. So if you're trying to review, making sure that the models are actually updated accurately. If you're doing coordination review, if you're managing the VDC end and running coordination collaboration meetings, when you're picking up mistakes in the model and assigning issues, you'll want to, in the next meeting, if they say they're resolved, all right, let's make sure that you actually resolved it in the model. Let's check the old version that was published against the new version. All right, these are deemed closed. Like we can make them closed. There are different statuses that you can assign in your issues. So if something is pending or in review, ultimately when we go through the coordination review, if we then confirm or verify that that item has been updated, we can close the issue. So it gives you a whole level of status checks or updates that you can assign to the model. So that's a good part of the coordination using BIM. This is something that you're challenged in doing with just 2D documents. We are able to track 2D document changes within Build as well. So if there is an update to a PDF version of a sheet, it will do a similar thing where it highlights the changes between the documents. But in a BIM workflow, we cannot automate the coordination of the 3D model like I showed through BIM Collaborate or the model coordination portion of the ACC. So if lines are just moving, there's nothing that's going to automatically flag that a line in a PDF doesn't match up with a new line in the PDF. You're only able to do that through the model coordination. So that would require BIM. And I'll run through this really quick. I don't know, Sarah, do we have a bunch of questions? I can't see the Q&A panel.
Yeah, there are quite a few.
Okay.
You want to go through those now, or you want to wait a few minutes?
Let me just show one thing about assets, because this was just updated. We've done a number of webinars on asset tracking. I have done them personally, so I know that we've got some videos out there that you all can reference about assets. But another area where we can support BIM through construction is through the extraction of model information or model data into the assets module of Autodesk Build. So we can actually load, we've got these Revit models in our project. One thing that we can do with assets is we can actually map 3D model assets to the assets module in Build. So I'm not going to go through the whole process here, but basically I've got the architectural and structural models for this LTU housing project here in the cloud. I ran through a few steps to extract content data. We call them families in Revit. So families, and map them to specific categories of assets within this project. Okay, that's great, but what does it mean? What can we do with it? Well, once you've got your assets mapped, and I only mapped a number of them. So for architecture, we have all of the doors. Essentially, you're kind of doing a takeoff at this point. You're pulling all the model information out from a specific category in Revit and creating an asset line item. But the power here, and I did this earlier today prior to the presentation, I extracted the plumbing fixtures from the architectural model. Through plumbing fixtures, and I know that I did this with this LK water cooler. So these are all of the drinking fountains that were in this model. And I was able to take their Revit unique ID and pull that into a barcode number. So you're able to track this through the mobile app with Build, depending on if you have a barcode scanner or if you have a barcode printed out and put onto a piece of equipment. I just did this the easy way. I took a number that was already unique to that object and pulled it into a spreadsheet in order to assign it a barcode. But there's probably already a manufactured barcode on this object. We can assign it that way. We can apply the barcode. All right, there's already a barcode on this water cooler. That's what I want to track my asset with. So we scan it, we enter it into our database for the project. And then you'll notice that because I pulled these from my Revit model, they are automatically, there's a link to the 3D model that's automatically established. And when we click on that, if I give it a second, it should zoom in. There we go. It brings me right to that object. I can isolate it. I can select that. I can view the properties, so the BIM information associated with that specific asset. You'll see that it links to the manufacturer's website. It gives us a model number. So this is the EZS4. Then we can look that up. If we're trying to pull warranty information, or if we're trying to tie this to the spec, we can download the information, and I know this doesn't match up, but directly to that object. Now, hopefully, whoever's designing it is using at least something similar. It doesn't have to be the LK version, it doesn't have to be an RFA, but as long as there is 3D content there, it doesn't matter if this is already spec'd in the BIM model. We can associate references. So even if this is just a generic drinking fountain, but then we pull from the spec specifically that this is the LK EZS4, from there we can start to associate files from our project. So I already pre-downloaded the spec information from this drinking fountain, or a drinking fountain, it's not the specific one. But I have the documents that support the specification, the installation, and the warranty. If I just want to assign those to that object, right from Build, Now this asset directly ties to these reference items. So someone in the field, we can change the status of the asset from ordered to installed to operational. And if they do have a barcode associated to this object, or if you even just search for a specific water cooler, you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can assign location information to these objects, but somehow it's easy for you to filter down to this component, and that component in the field, we can pull up things like the installation documentation. Then we can change the status once that's been installed. We can designate that as an installed asset. It's something that they just updated recently here in Build for progress tracking. When we view our 3D models, so what I wanted to get to with the assets is show you that not only can you associate files, but if those files go through a submittal approval, you can tie the approved submittal to it. And now when we're getting into the commissioning and the handover, all of this information is linked back to the model. And these are the sorts of things that owners are starting to require. That can then be exported to FM data. We can send the attachments with it. There are all types of really cool stuff we can do. But think of the 3D model as just being a container for all of that information that we want to assign to something within our project, rather than it being in a schedule or a flat document, a printed document. It lives within this system. So what I wanted to also show with status, they've changed the visibility. So if any assets, once they're installed or the status of them has changed, it is now highlighting the progress with colors. So I'm just doing this with windows and equipment, but you could do this with slabs, walls. Someone in the field is tracking as things are being installed. You can start to see the construction progress live within the model, as long as they're changing the status of the equipment that's being installed on site. So probably way more advanced ways of doing this, especially when you have barcodes and tracking, but some pretty cool stuff. And ways that we can manage this post design through construction and then preparing us for handover to the owner. All right. What types of questions we have? I can't see them, Sarah.
Okay, the first question, it says, where can I exactly get training in BIM if I've never worked in this field before?
We can train you. So one of the things that we do at IMAGINiT, we have implementation and training classes around the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So I don't know if I have a contact. Sarah, does something go out in the email once people attend that they can contact us about learning more about training or resources?
Yeah, there is. There's a link to the contact us form, and from there we can get the individual connected to the right person. There is another question. It says, BIM has been around long enough, but its implementation is way behind, especially in the government sector. Do you have statistics on the full implementation of BIM in the design and construction industry? In some instances, we are even going backwards, afraid of implementing the basic CAD applications.
Ooh, that is a loaded question. I don't have any infographics or anything that I can share. I know that you could probably dig some up from Autodesk. I know I've seen some independent studies that they've referenced in other presentations to show what the adoption rate is and where the industry is at, but I don't have anything specifically prepared to show today.
Okay, next question. How do you sell BIM to clients that feel like this work should already be part of the design team's efforts? Clients feel the A&E should be doing this on all projects and shouldn't have to pay for it.
Through very specific wording in the contract, I would think. And that's really one of the reasons, because I hear this a lot. Like, who is responsible for it? why are we fronting the bill when it should have been done in a different phase of the project? I think it all comes back, and that's where, you know, if the owner is not educated, then they don't have the ammo, or they don't have the knowledge to back up what they're asking for. And not that they're necessarily taken advantage of, but it gives either design or construction a way out of saying, no, this is what we agreed to. You didn't word that specifically in the contract. If the owner comes back, or the owner's rep comes back and says, no, we explicitly put in the RFP that you needed to deliver on these requirements. If it's in the contract, now you have the means for liability, litigation to back that up. So I suppose it comes to the project planning and making sure that you're very concise in the way that you've planned out those deliverables, and being more educated about the LOD matrix here and what those different LOD levels require. Reading through how they're defined in the contract document really serves as your legal grounding to back up who is responsible for what. And if you say, hey, that LOD, we weren't responsible for it, it's right in the contract, that was on the AE, then you have something to fight it with. But otherwise, if it's very ambiguous, then I don't know. It's your word against someone else's, or the owner not paying for it.
Okay, another question. So since Unify will be part of Autodesk Docs, will we get it if we have the AEC collection? Is that correct?
From what I read earlier this week, that is correct. So I actually, I've got a notification in an email from Unify, that from an Autodesk press release, and I haven't looked up anything specifically because I know they just announced this on Monday at AU. But from the Unify email, it said that anyone with an AEC collection, or even, I think, even just Autodesk Docs will have access to, they're calling it the Autodesk Content Catalog. So ACC. Yeah, but you should have access with the AEC collection, or any form of Autodesk Docs will give you access, from what I understand.
Okay, great. Next question, are markups available within are markups available within Docs licenses?
Yes, you can mark up. I should have shown this. I was showing issues. We cannot do markups to the 3D models yet. Your general annotation like revision clouds and text notations. You can pin issues right now. I believe that they are going to update to be able to do different locked views and saved views of the 3D models so that you can mark up. But even just with Docs, if I go to a 2D sheet within my Revit model here, I'll show you that all of these markup tools, and this only requires Docs. You have access to all of the markup tools as well as issues. So we can do cloud markups, freehand markups. Whoops, clicked on something there. Text, polygons, measure, all that stuff. You can change the colors of your markups and so on. Yeah, but all you need for that is a Docs license or Docs access.
Okay, next question. Are the specs being written before or after BIM modeling? For instance, are the BIM models being used as placeholders until the products are selected?
Typically, yes. But, well, and again, this probably should be outlined in the contract. Most of the time, it's industry best practice, and in my opinion, it's best practice to follow the guidelines of what the AIA has laid out in the BIM execution plan. And if you read LOD 300, you can represent geometry in a general means. It should be accurate in size, location, shape, quantity. But there's a note in there that says other non-geographic information can be or should be assigned to the object. To me, that speaks to details and spec information. So we can use general. It doesn't have to be modeled to a nth level of detail. You don't have to have a fabrication level model within the collective BIM, but it should have some ability or some spec associated to it at a level 300. So maybe at 200, we don't know, we haven't spec'd it out, but as you're going through your construction documentation, like traditional means, you're writing your spec as you're approaching CD, you should be assigning that specification to the objects that you're designing and documenting. So it's somewhere in that phase. If there's a change to the spec, then we can track that, we can review it, we can update the spec. But generally, I would say it's part of that sort of that 100%, getting to that 100% CD, that it should be specified during the BIM phase, not during construction, obviously.
Okay, next question. Do you need a separate license to use Autodesk Construction Cloud / BIM 360?
No. BIM 360, the older platform, if you have BIM 360, you'll have access to the unified platform ACC. If you have even just docs, gives you the ability to go from BIM 360 to ACC unified. If you don't have licenses to build, then obviously you would need to purchase licenses to Autodesk Build, but you have access to old BIM 360 projects and new ACC projects through that one license. So there's not a separation between the access to the platforms. So you can support old projects that were in BIM 360, and you can support your new projects that are in the unified platform with that one license.
Okay, and are the BIM files updated after RFI / change orders from the contractor?
Well, this also comes back to that contract document. So yes, they should be, but it depends on what is outlined in the contract. If we're specifying that something, the model updates happen during the construction phase, then someone is responsible once an RFI has been approved or there's a change order to go back into the model and make that change. Who's responsible for it? That's based on the contract.
Okay, and then the very last question, is there a specific version for fab shops?
For fab shops,
Specific
version of what of the BIM execution plan, or of the software doesn't have any, the solution doesn't have any different versions. So everything falls under those cloud products, that slide I brought up earlier. There are probably a lot of different workflows for fabrication. Let's go into, where's that slide? So right now, these products here, let's go from this view. There's nothing specifically that supports fabrication through these solutions, but I know that there are PLM solutions. There are Fusion 3